Hello and well met. This is Laverne with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today we're going to be talking some more about the Pathfinder 2 rule set in Fantasy Grounds. It is a very beautiful rule set. I think it was well done. It's been out for a while, so it's not like it's a new rule set. There isn't a whole lot of content out there regarding Fantasy Grounds in so much as the player-facing content or even GM content. So I'm going to be working on that a little bit at the beginning of this year. I'm actually trying to assemble a team. I put out kind of a call on the forums, on our YouTube channel, and on social media. So if you're new to Fantasy Grounds and you have a decent handle on Pathfinder 2, we're offering a basic standard license and perhaps a box set or even the core rules. So if you guys are familiar with the Pathfinder rule set, but you don't really necessarily know anything about Fantasy Grounds, we're kind of offering a kind of a beginner set and kind of give you a start. And what I'm hoping to do is to help grow the community and the rule set around it. I've spent a lot of time focusing on 5e, and I think at least until the monster manual and some more content comes out, I'm going to fall back on Pathfinder 2. And I'm also looking for individuals who wouldn't mind doing some videos regarding Fantasy Grounds and the Pathfinder 2 rule set. I know it's a little late in the making. It's taken me a while to come around, but generally we do 5e content. But I think Pathfinder deserves a fair shake. Paizo's a decent company, and they have tons of content out. So, that's one thing. My only thing that I was discouraged about a little bit was the reboot, and that whole thing irritated me a little bit because I'm thinking I have to go out and buy these new remastered books, but I really don't. I have a lot of content right now. I probably have enough classic or Pathfinder Legacy content, the second edition and first, to keep me busy for years. So you don't have to go out and necessarily buy the remastered content because that's another pretty good expense. I think that's like around $100 to do that. So I have enough stuff here to keep me busy, and I'm not using or showing the updated rules here. This is just the legacy Pathfinder 2e. But what I have here loaded is basically some content that I have from the Fantasy Grounds store. I'll have links to the content in the description, an affiliate link if you guys want to invest in any of this stuff. But essentially, there's some content here that you can start with that will help you kind of get your head wrapped around the rule set. I would advise to get at least a Fantasy Grounds standard license and perhaps the beginner box, which actually comes with some stuff here. So you have a start section, you have the box set, the Game Master's Guide, you have kind of like a hero's handbook, you have a beginner box, Pirate King's Plunder, and then some pre-gens, which is what I have up here on the top. These are pre-generated characters. So you pretty much have everything you need to kind of get started, or at least most of the things you need. And you don't have to spend hours building characters and that sort of thing. So this will give you a chance to check out Fantasy Grounds, but also check out Pathfinder and kind of get your mind wrapped around the rule set. So if I was going to start this myself, I'd probably spend a few months messing about with the basic rules. I think that's what I'm going to be doing for the next few months, is kind of getting my head wrapped around it. I've been kind of fighting this for a while to cram more information in my head because I got way too much stuff already. But I think it's important I know at least a little bit about it, and also I'm assembling a team of other users that are interested in this rule set too. And I've had about 3 or 4 people that are kind of stepping up and willing to help out and maybe do an occasional event and answer questions and that sort of thing in our Fantasy Grounds Discord. So that's one thing that I'm working on for 2025. And I will be still doing my other stuff occasionally, but I won't have as much time for that. But as far as Pathfinder goes, what I'm hoping is to inspire people to start using the rule set, grow the community, offer a little bit more content, because right now the main content that's out there was put out by Trenlo, who is the developer for the rule set, but he basically focuses on releases and some of the content, but he doesn't really get too deep into running games and stuff as much as I'd hoped. And the other thing is, I always wondered why. I've seen a lot of pushback from the community. It's like, oh, there's no Pathfinder 2 content. Well, I don't see anyone doing it either. So I'm trying to kind of provide that sort of experience for people who are new to the platform or people that haven't played in a while. So this may not be useful to you if you are already a veteran of Fantasy Grounds and you're already using Pathfinder. And I hear that and I've seen that the Foundry implementation of Pathfinder 2 is really nice. So I think Fantasy Grounds could be just as nice if we had enough people out there using it and actually putting out content and such. So I'm hoping that this will help inspire people to do so. So I wanted to kind of go over some things about the rule set that I researched and that I kind of picked up along the way from others. So if you are a fantasy kind of role-playing individual that likes D&D or anything that's kind of like that, or Conan, or whatever you're into, the starter box will help you kind of have a foundation. So I think of the starter box kind of like the Lost Mine of Phandelver approach for the 5e rule set when that first came out. And then I also think of it as like a little bit of like Saltmarsh. So if you're familiar with the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh and that campaign, and then also a little bit of Call of Cthulhu as you get deeper into the Abomination Vaults section. So you can technically start with the box set and then go into the Troubles in Otari and then go into the Abomination Vault. So you kind of have a big story arc that you can get into if you decide to pursue the rule set. And I think it's got some pretty decent lore, lots of fighting. This Abomination Vaults is like a large, like 10 level mega dungeon thing. And then the starter box kind of keeps you in and around the city, kind of gets you familiar with the rule set. You get these pre-gens. And what I think you can do with the pre-gens is run them through the beginner box and then retire them if you don't want to use them after that. Maybe make them NPCs that can be called upon and then actually build your own characters once you run the Troubles into Otari. So basically, Pathfinder Beginner Box is kind of like an entry into the Otari town and the region. It's kind of streamlined, introductory, and there's a little adventure called Menace under Otari, and it kind of serves as an on-ramp for new players and GMs. So it's kind of a way to get used to the rules, the setting, the lore, characters, all that kind of stuff. So spoiler alert, so if you are planning on playing in Pathfinder 2, or you want to run it, but you want to kind of take your own research and such, then at this point you may want to turn off the video or revisit it later. But I'm going to go through some of the content, and I'd like to mention that I do have Troubles in Otari Adventure. I have the box set loaded. I have a flip mat, which is part of the Paizo Pathfinder 2 map packs, which is all the stuff's available in Fantasy Grounds. I do have the Sirenscape modules here. I don't think I'm going to be using those now, but if you want to add sound to your content later on, like say when you get more familiar with Fantasy Grounds, you can start adding in sound if you want. And that's a whole nother topic. But basically, I like the idea that you get these pre-gens and you can just add them to Fantasy Grounds without going through all the character creation stuff. It's very important to learn character creation, but I think it's just as important for onboarding to just be able to play and check things out before you dive into all that, all those nuances. So I would advise just picking up this box set and then just kind of noodling around until you kind of get used to it, and then figure out what you want to do with the Fantasy Grounds and with the rest of the content. So if you make it through the box set and all your players are happy and you kind of keep their attention long enough, I would suggest you maybe retire these characters and actually build your own characters. Maybe they're relatives, or maybe you can expand upon these pre-gens if you want. and play in the troubles of in Otari, because this kind of takes you around the region and it gives you an idea of how an adventure rolls out, more of a full-length adventure, and it ties back into Otari. So it's in the same area. You're going to have similar NPCs and maybe even recurring stuff. So you'll have chances to meet people that may occur in other adventures later on. So if you're really deep into it and you have the time for it, if you're a GM, I would suggest that you would probably want to get involved with the Abomination Vaults, which is in the same area. It's this like lighthouse that isn't very far away from Otari. There's a whole backstory. There's many bosses and big monsters and overarching story arc. So the adventure paths, there's like 3 of them in the Abomination Vaults, and they all tie in together. And if you launch your campaign using the starter box and the Troubles in Otari adventure, it's kind of a one-shot type thing, or not as a one-shot, just like a single adventure. That will give you the footwork, or the foundation of the setting and the region and factions and the NPCs and all that good stuff. So I'm going to go to the activation window. I want to see if I have any of the Abomination Vaults. I'm pretty sure I have at least one. So when I'm running this, yeah, so I do have, at least I have this, and I do have the first one. So if you were going to continue the adventure, you can load these later on, or if you're doing research for even a starter campaign, this will give you some lore and some backstory. And apparently when you go through the Abomination Vaults, you're going to meet some important NPCs, which you would probably have to backpedal or kind of make something up and kind of retcon who these individuals are, because they're not really introduced until the second adventure path. So if you were going to run through this and then all of a sudden there's this NPC that should have been there the whole time, that's the kind of thing that, if you're worried about that kind of thing with the consistency of the story and such, I would advise you to essentially try to go through a little bit of that content if you have it, and take some notes on the NPCs and see how they tie into the starter box and especially the Troubles in Otari adventure, because that will help you later on as you go through the adventures to be certain that you're going to kind of get that lore consistency, and you're not going to be surprised by some of the evolution and the realization of what's going on. So honestly, though, if I was going to run this, I would only have the box set and maybe the core rules, and that's about all I would need. The only reason I have all this stuff loaded is just so I can look at it and kind of get an idea of how it's laid out. And I do have the first adventure in the Abomination Vaults, but I don't own the other 2, or Volume 2 or Volume 3 in the Adventure Path. So that's something that I would probably hold off on until I'm certain that my players and my group and time will allow for that. But just having the beginner box and maybe Troubles in Otari, and maybe even this map pack if you needed more of a generic reference, that would be helpful to start with. And what's nice about Fantasy Grounds is they do have a partnership with Paizo. So what that means is if you buy content from the Fantasy Grounds store and you connect it to the Pathfinder digital store, not for the hardbacks, but for the PDFs, you get a discount one way or the other. So for instance, if you buy a full adventure on Smiteworks website or even Steam, if you synchronize your accounts with the Paizo store and with the Fantasy Grounds website, you'll get a slight discount depending on what the content is and what you own or don't own. So for example, if you didn't own like the Abomination Vaults, but you purchased it on Fantasy Grounds, you'll get the PDFs. So if you buy it in Fantasy Grounds, you get the PDFs on the store. It's part of the cost, essentially. However, if you've been collecting PDFs, the digital ones, on the Paizo store, and you've taken advantage of the Humble Bundles and those sort of things, once you synchronize your Paizo digital account with the Smiteworks store, it will pull over your purchases and anything you have a discount for, you'll get between a couple dollars up to maybe $10 or $15 off, depending on what the content is. I think the biggest discount I've ever seen is like $10 or something like that. But people had asked, why is it so expensive? Why is the Pathfinder stuff so expensive? It's because you're getting not only the Fantasy Grounds version, but you're also paying for the PDF. So that's one reason why the content is around $50 when it's brand new, as opposed to like a D&D adventure is like around $30. But the 5e Dungeons and Dragons Wizards of the Coast content doesn't support PDFs. So, that's kind of the good thing about Paizo and Pathfinder is you do have that extra stuff. So if you wanted to do some research, you don't necessarily have to fire up Fantasy Grounds every time to do it. You can do it all within your content, depending on what you own and such. But you could read PDFs on your phone or on a tablet, so that's kind of handy when it comes to game masters prepping and reading about the content. I know a lot of people don't like staring at a digital screen all day, so they might be doing that at work, and they don't want to spend another 4 to 6 hours doing that during game time too. So it may be helpful to have the PDFs in addition to the Fantasy Grounds content. And once you get familiar with Fantasy Grounds, you can actually enter a lot of that stuff yourself. So like adventure paths and those sort of things, those are fairly, I wouldn't say easy, they're time consuming, but they're not super difficult to add into Fantasy Grounds. But as far as rule books go, I don't know if I would feel comfortable or confident enough to enter all that data. I think it would be tedious for me. I don't know if I would be that motivated to enter in all the rule books, but you can. And you have the Archives of Nethys too, which is a really good resource. So if you are missing something or you wanted to know something about a new book, you at least have that to reference so that you're not totally lost, or if your player comes in with some type of feat that you're not sure of, you have that reference too. So pretty well covered in Paizo and Pathfinder products. It really has a lot of support, decent company, partnership with Fantasy Grounds. The Steam part of this is a little tricky. So if you buy it on Steam, you have to synchronize it with the Fantasy Grounds website, the content. And then you have to synchronize it with the Paizo store. And then sometimes it takes a while for the license keys and the stuff that you own in Fantasy Grounds to transfer over to the Steam store. So if you're buying all this stuff through Steam, it takes a while for the content to show up in your library if you don't purchase it through Steam. So in other words, you may own it in Fantasy Grounds, but it doesn't necessarily show in the store on Steam. So sometimes that sort of information takes a while to go from Smiteworks to the store on Steam. And I think Smiteworks or whoever sends over that information, and it probably can take anywhere from a month to 6 weeks or something like that. I don't remember the actual time. Okay, so Smiteworks offers a 30-day guarantee money back thing if you buy the content through their store. If you buy the content on Steam, you will not have the same kind of money back guarantee. So it's a shorter time frame to return your content. Whereas if you buy it on the Fantasy Grounds store, you will get the 30 days or less refund through customer service. So if you buy it through Steam, their return policy is a lot different than Fantasy Grounds. And honestly, Steam is just a purchase point. It doesn't really host the game. I think the only real benefits to it is you kind of have an all-in-one launcher for your games and such. You keep track of how much time you put into it. But other than that, there is no real reason to use Steam other than local pricing. So if you live in a different country other than the United States, then you might get favorable pricing depending on your local economy. So if you live in Brazil or in another country and you're looking at the prices, it's probably still kind of expensive, but not as expensive as buying it from the Fantasy Grounds store. So that's the only other advantage I can think of to buy the content on Steam. But other than that, I mean, you can take advantage of the Humble Bundles that come out at least once or twice a year. And generally speaking, you get like 25 to 30 books or map packs or rule books or whatever at like a fraction of the cost, like 35 bucks or something like that. You can have like a large library of PDFs. And then once you have all that stuff in place, you can go to the Fantasy Grounds website and you can actually take advantage of that discount, and it will show you what stuff you qualify for on the store. So I'm going to go to Fantasy Grounds, and I want to go to the store, and I'm looking at my Paizo account sync. So first, if you buy it on Steam, you want to do the Steam account sync to make sure that anything you purchase from Steam gets transferred to the Fantasy Grounds store, and then when you update Fantasy Grounds, it'll pull in your purchases. However, if you want to make sure that you have the discount, you got to make sure you do the Paizo sync too. So this Paizo sync, you have to authorize it, and you have like a number on the Paizo store in your settings for your account, and it has like a partner code or something like that. But so like right here, I can retrieve all the purchases that I have on the Paizo website. So all this stuff here, most of this is from purchases through the Humble Bundle. So I didn't buy all these things at full price. I mean, I got them really cheap. And then once you've done that, then you can send all of your Paizo purchases made on Fantasy Grounds to Paizo so that you can get to the actual, I am able to buy stuff, Fantasy Grounds stuff from Brazil, but only from Steam. Yeah, I understand that totally. And then you can send purchase information to Paizo, so that way, if you owned anything and purchased it through the Fantasy Grounds store or Steam, eventually you can send this over to Paizo and pick up your discounts or your free content. So I'm going to send my purchase or my content that all my stuff is synchronized now. So then if I go to see personal discounts, which is another step, all this stuff here is the stuff that I qualify for a discount. So just for example, I have some Starfinder stuff in here. I have, classic Pathfinder. I got all kinds of stuff in here. Map packs, just all kinds of stuff. So in other words, some of these older flip maps, it's $13.99, but since I own the PDF, it's only like $3.50. And this also might have something to do with bundling. I don't remember how that works. I don't think it stacks anymore like it used to, but there again. So here's a Pathfinder adventure called The Slithering. So if I wanted that adventure, instead of paying $22, it's only $7. So this is a good way to see what you qualify for if you've got a bunch of content. So here's the Inner Sea World Guide for I think this is for the Classic. I don't think that's Pathfinder 2. Let's go. I want to look at some more Pathfinder 2 stuff. Let's see. But these are my discounts. So if I was going to buy any of this stuff, it's going to be a lot cheaper for me. So this is, let's see. I want to look at, so this is newer. So this is the Extinction Curse, okay? Normally $25, but for me, since I own the PDF and it's a little bit older, I think, and it's $7. So for me anyways, so that's not bad. So just looking at this, like strength of 1,000, same thing. So I can pick up a lot of these older adventure paths for like $7. That's pretty cool. So if you want to get caught up on your library and you've taken advantage of that Humble Bundle, and then you register those on the Paizo store. And then from there, you go to your Fantasy Grounds store, you link up the accounts, and then you check you synchronize it, and then you basically get all those discounts, or you get free PDFs on the other end if you bought everything through the Fantasy Grounds store. So that's why the Pathfinder content is more expensive usually, because you're paying not just for Fantasy Grounds, but you're also getting the PDF. But you just have to pick it up on the Paizo store. So that's a decent deal there if you're interested in Pathfinder. I think it's a really cool partnership. Now, not everything's one for one. I've seen people complaining or mentioning about how this one isn't discounted, but this other one is. I know there was some change up a couple years ago where Paizo had raised or changed their pricing, and it kind of messed with the pricing model. But generally speaking, a lot of the older content is heavily discounted, and you'll pick up a lot of that through the Humble Bundle. So if you don't want to go out and buy all these adventures, just wait for the Humble Bundle and just get the core rule books and maybe one adventure path. That'll keep you busy for a while, for sure. If you're like me, though, go crazy and try to have everything at once. That's who I am, but you don't necessarily have to do that. So the other thing is the forums. So if you are using Pathfinder already, or you're a Fantasy Grounds user, or maybe you're new, there is a specific game system section for Pathfinder, and then they have it divided into Classic and Pathfinder 2, and I think Starfinder has its own section. Yeah, it does. So for Pathfinder 2, if you click on here, there's a bunch of threads in here, and this is basically where you can post things about the rule set, or maybe you see something weird with calculations or whatever. You can also report errors in here if you think it's Pathfinder related. If it's a Fantasy Grounds thing, you can post it here, but you might want to post it in the actual House of Healing. But if they feel it belongs here, they'll transfer it over. So in this particular area, I actually have an event here. So this is Pathfinder 2 Q&A event that's happening this coming Thursday. For me, it's in the afternoon, but if you live in Europe or Australia, it might be a different time. But the link here in the Discord invite is essentially the time will show up for you if you're a Discord user. One stipulation is it may not show if you're using a VPN, so it might be blocking your local time zone, so that may interfere with it. But other than that, it should show up and it'll give you your local time. But it's Thursday, December 12th, so if you're East Coast, it's probably like around 3 p.m. If you're in Europe, it's probably around 8 or 9, 10, depends on where you're at. If you're in Australia, it could be like, 5, 6 at night, or maybe 3 in the afternoon the next day. So this is just kind of a preliminary invite, and all this is going to be is kind of like a Q&A. Kind of the people are interested in getting into Pathfinder, or people who are using Pathfinder, and kind of discuss different things related to the rule set and Fantasy Grounds. So if you guys are interested in that, join the Fantasy Grounds Academy. All my links and stuff that pertains to that will be in the video description. I'm also going to put out a social media invite for this, so later today I'll put out a link for this for people to join. I might post it a couple times, like maybe one tomorrow, and I'll do one like maybe a couple hours before the event starts. And then after that, we're building kind of like a team, or at least I'm trying to. I don't know if it'll stick or who's going to hang around, or who's going to be a part of it. But in our community for Fantasy Grounds Academy, we've invited people to basically join and keep an eye on our Paizo rule set channel. And then this would be some good stuff that you might want to look into. So all these individuals up here had mentioned that they have interest in supporting the rule set, at least helping other community members. All of these guys have different levels of experience. There's a couple of new people. There's people that are veterans. So Stefan here is a really good teacher. He does multiple rule sets like Star Trek and such, but he's going to do an open, unstructured kind of like a Q&A for Pathfinder rule set. And not a lot of content out there, so I would advise you either join this, or perhaps maybe in the future, or even contribute. So if you're good at Pathfinder and you want more people to play with, I think it's helpful and useful if you start to consider making content. And I've offered these individuals, to do some production on it. Can have the nice overlays, whatever you guys need to get this out, because I think that Pathfinder is a really nice rule set, and if you haven't been around for a while, this is actually the new theme for Pathfinder. So, the Smiteworks is making some efforts into making this better, and they did a really good job with that transition, or at least a decent job, transitioning from Legacy to the remastered rules. kind of a messy thing, but I think they did a really good job, and you can still go back and forth between the older content and the newer content. And that's kind of going on with D&D too. It's kind of a transition period. So if that gets frustrating for you, honestly, I would stick with one or the other if you can, or start a new campaign with the remastered stuff, and then slowly start pulling over some stuff from the classics. I don't think adventures would be impacted too much. It looks like more to do with rules and player facing stuff more than anything else. But nonetheless, it's still a challenge, and it's not easy to do in a virtual tabletop. You can hand wave a lot of stuff around a table, and that's much easier to make that transition. But in Fantasy Grounds, since it's tied into dice rolls and mechanics and effects and all that kind of stuff, it's a little bit more tricky to do. Pathfinder 2 does have its own guided kind of character creation. I'm not going to go through character creation right now, but it does have a guided kind of system to help you through that process. And I'm certain that if you get a decent GM or you're learning with a new person, you'll get it down after a while after you build a few characters. There's a lot of little ifs, ands, and buts and little nuances to Pathfinder because there's so much content out there. But you'll get it eventually, and I think that putting in some time, practice, effort, and getting to know the functionality and how Fantasy Grounds interfaces with the Pathfinder 2 rule set. Once you get that stuff going, I think it'll come more natural to you. It just takes a bit of time to get used to and digest all the different stuff. And Pathfinder is pretty robust. There's so much stuff out there that it's almost overwhelming if you're new. The other thing I could mention that Smiteworks has a really good developer, Trenlow or Martin. He's a really nice guy, and I've talked to him a few times, and we've done a little things on the side. But he's a decent person. He's pretty approachable. He's not smug. He's not an asshole, and he definitely is trying to make this rule set good. And he kind of relies on our feedback, and he can guide us in certain things. And he's really versed in Fantasy Grounds, so he's a pretty decent individual. I like him a lot. And as far as the community goes, I'm a little bit surprised or shocked after 3 or 4 years that there's not more Pathfinder 2 content. I've seen a lot of people griping about it, like, oh, everything's 5e. Well, I don't see anyone doing anything, so I don't understand what the problem is. But I think they're waiting for for maybe Smiteworks to do it. But the problem with that is you only have so many people in that group, and they may not be well versed in Pathfinder. So you got to have the people that know the rule set and how it interfaces with Fantasy Grounds. And that's the only reason I can do 5e stuff, because I know it really well and I know how the little intricacies and all the little nuances. But there are not very many people that can do that both. They either know Pathfinder really well or they know, Fantasy Grounds, but they don't necessarily know both. And that's where the rubber meets the road, and it gets difficult to create content if you don't know one or the other. I mean, you don't have to know everything, but it's nice to know enough about Fantasy Grounds, especially like character creation and all these little nuances that go on, because that's probably the biggest initial hurdle. And then knowing all the mechanics and what's changed between the legacy and the remastered, and you get into all that stuff, it can be pretty overwhelming. And I think that one of the things that had deterred people initially was that it was fairly new rule set. And then once they learn that they're going to have a remastered thing, you wouldn't want to put out a whole bunch of new content and then just to turn around and say, oh, well, now we got to redo it all because it's all been fixed or updated. So I get it, but I'm just saying, if you guys are community members and you know about the rule set, and if you want to make some videos or at least like character creation, hit us up and I'll try to at least get it produced for you, make you some overlays, show you how to set up your OBS, whatever it takes, because I think this is going to take more than just Smiteworks. I'm really hoping that they will start pulling Paizo over more, because we did a event with Paizo a few years ago. It was a lot of fun, but I realized that most of those people at that time, there was like 4 or 5 of them, they never even played the Fantasy Grounds version of it, and only 1 or 2 people out of that group had tried to even come close. They played the Roll20 version, and that was like 3 or 4 years ago. And I was really shocked that not very many of those people who worked on the content knew much about the Fantasy Grounds aspect of it. I mean, they know it exists, they know what it is, but they've never tried it. And I'm hoping that Adam and Smiteworks or maybe even Trenlo gets involved with trying to get them more involved with it. And like I went to the Paizo website and I hit up Brad Bound because he's in charge of marketing. And I looked at the Paizo website and I was shocked to find out that there isn't on their community blog or their forums, I should say. They have a digital products. There's a general discussion and then there's a Foundry thing. So I don't see much in the way of, I'm not saying there isn't any Fantasy Grounds content, but that's basically the first thing I saw. I haven't looked at this in a long time, so I was trying to see if they had any discussion going on under their digital products. This might be kind of new. It might be more in the general area, but nonetheless, I don't see a section here for Fantasy Grounds, and I was wondering about that. So I hit up Brad, and I was like, we should probably have, or at least look into getting a discussion group going on. And it's going to take all of us and the people that use the Fantasy Grounds for especially for Pathfinder to, use that space to get more people involved. I mean, that's the only way it's going to happen. Otherwise, you're just going to keep getting people complaining, oh, it's all 5e. Well, it is all 5e because most people are kind of networked in with that. There's a lot of stuff out there. Whereas Pathfinder, it seems like it's been around a long time, but for Fantasy Grounds, it seems like it's still kind of niche, and I don't understand why that is. Other than the fact that most people probably don't want to reinvest in a bunch of stuff and have to relearn a new rule set, I get that. But you would think there would be a lot more newer people getting into it. But what I'm starting to notice is they're going and using other virtual tabletops, which isn't really a bad thing, but it doesn't really build the Fantasy Grounds community. So anyways, I'm hoping that they'll put in a section here for the digital products, because I think that's something that should be here. And I'm not certain why it is that way, but so if you go to the digital products section, I got to log in here, but I'm not going to do that now. But basically, there's a general discussion. That's probably where any Fantasy Grounds stuff would be. And then you have a section for that. And maybe even some of the older discussion parts under just the basic forums probably has some stuff here. Like here's the second edition. And then it gets into that. So there's probably some Fantasy Grounds stuff going on in here. I haven't looked that deep into it, but there isn't a whole lot of Fantasy Grounds content out there. And I'm hoping that with Adam's help, Adam Bradford, and with Brad Bound's marketing, and then some of our passionate people like Trenlo and the people who are working on the rule set is going to help grow this thing. And I don't think they can do it alone. So that's kind of why I've kind of did a call to arms here for our community and trying to get people interested. And honestly, until the 5e stuff gets straightened out and they get some more content out there, I'm not even going to worry about it too much. I've done some preliminary work on it, but I think I'm going to spend 2025, at least first quarter, more on this stuff and less on the D&D for a while. And I won't have as much time for it anyway. So what time I do have will be trying to build that, because there really isn't any content out there. Nothing really big. I mean, if you want to know about the platform and Fantasy Grounds and the technical data, there's stuff for that. But when it comes to running adventures, GM stuff, player-facing stuff, character creation, there's not a lot of that out there. And I think that's one of the missing components that our community has for this particular rule set and many other non-D&D rule sets. So like Suede, they're doing a lot of really cool changes for, Savage Worlds. And they're rebuilding that whole rule set. So, I've offered them to do the same thing. I said, hey guys, when you're ready, let me know and we'll do some videos, at least get a couple out there. And they're just kind of like, okay, they have a few people that are interested in doing it. So we'll see what happens. But I can only do so much. So, I've already done tons of 5e stuff. I've done a lot of AI stuff, and I've done a bunch of tutorials and mapping and all that kind of stuff. But I haven't touched much on Pathfinder. I mean, I've showed off a couple new products. I've done a little bit of Cyberpunk and Alien and some other. What's the other one? A couple others, and I've had guests and stuff and done some cool stuff. But I really think it's about time now that the remastered stuff is out, and once things start settling down, 2025, I really believe that there's no reason why the Fantasy Grounds, Smiteworks, and Paizo can't get together and really start, doing stuff for it, because it's ridiculous. It's supported, it's partnered, and everything, but everyone wants to use another platform or a different method of playing, which is fine. But I don't know, or I don't think that it's any worse or any better than having an official rule set in Fantasy Grounds. So might look better, might even play better, but I really think that there's a chance, and I just passionate about Fantasy Grounds enough to where I care, where I think that people should be using it, and I would like to see a little bit more Pathfinder. That's kind of what I'm getting at. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I don't know a ton about Pathfinder, but from what I'm seeing, the quality is decent. I mean, their maps are way better than anything I normally see from out of Wizard of the Coast. So if you look at their maps, they're a little bit more digital and a lot less painted. I mean, there's painting in there, but these maps are actually much more conducive to virtual tabletop. They work out better, I think, in regards to virtual tabletops coming from Paizo. Now, they may not be the prettiest maps, but they are decent. I would give them a B+ for sure. And they work with virtual tabletops. There's not all this weird sloppiness. It's pretty square. There isn't a whole lot of these painted maps that are more artistic. So, the maps alone in this, and I have a bunch of them because I use them in D&D sometimes, but these are decent. I mean, they look pretty damn good. Let me see. Yeah, so, I mean, this will work. And if you don't like how simple they are, you can populate them with assets. So if you wanted more furniture, or maybe you wanted some, dust or steam, or, you can add that stuff from Fantasy Grounds to make these maps come to life and look a lot more interesting. So anyhow, you guys have enjoy the rest of your weekend, and hopefully this kind of my rally call. Come on, Pathfinder 2 folks and people that want to try Fantasy Grounds. Let us know, man. I got a standard license, and I have a box set, and then I have the core rules and a few adventures and stuff and some license keys. So, it isn't a full Fantasy Grounds Ultimate license, but at least it's a standard license. You kind of get started if you are new and you don't have any of that stuff. Let us know, and we'll try to help you a little bit.